Hello everybody and welcome to this learning video or revision video on artificial things. Now we are going to be looking at section 1 only, which is Dave and Laura's duet. Okay, so let's get started. What will you need with you? So I would highly recommend you having your artificial things work booklet with you that we've been working on in lesson, and feel free to add as we go, and then your revision guide will just provide some further support for you as we go along. So understanding everything you need to know about artificial things. So first of all, you need to know about the choreographic content. So you must know about specific movement examples in terms of their actions, dynamics, space and relationships. And then you must know about the structuring devices that are used throughout artificial things, and then the choreographic devices as well, which are used. Okay, you also must know about the features of production. So this includes staging, lighting, props, costume, dancers, oral setting and dance for camera. Now in this example we don't need to know about dance for camera because this is a live work on stage. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with the choreographic content. Remember, this is just for section 1, so Dave and Laura's duet. Which happens is obviously the very first section, so starts at 0 seconds and then goes all the way till 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Okay, before we start, I just wanted to set the scene for you. So Lucy Bennett, as we know, is the choreographer of the work. And here's just a statement from her. So she was walking to the station early one Sunday morning to teach at Larbham. Snow had fallen in the night and I was the first person to tread on the pathway. The sound of my footsteps crushing the snow, the cleanliness of the urban landscape covered in white, conjured an image of Laura perched on her collapsed wheelchair adrift in the snow. This idea led me to think about Laura adrift in a snow globe. I heard the sounds of footsteps and played with the idea of someone observing Laura from afar before making tentative contact. So this summarises essentially what this very first section of the piece is, because exactly how Lucy Bennett envisioned it is pretty much exactly how we see it now. We can see the collapsed wheelchair, we can see Laura kind of perched on the floor, we can see the snow, the fake snow that's part of the setting that's scattered around her. And we know that Dave kind of enters, he might have viewed her from afar and enters and comes and makes contact with her. So essentially what Lucy Bennett envisioned is essentially how the very first section starts. Okay, movement content then, action, space, dynamics and relationships. Of course, I'd like you to watch the piece and come up with your own examples, but let's just go through some of the key moments. So in terms of actions, so we know that Laura is sitting on the floor by her collapsed wheelchair and Dave walks over and approaches her. So certain actions that happen, obviously sitting, reaching, pulling, staring, embracing and leaning. And this contributes to the intention, of course, of being gazed at by afar, because there is a lot of kind of head circles, head rolls, head looking moments. So that, of course, just reinforces that idea of kind of looking or searching or being looked at. Moving over to space, so they are downstage right. They're both Laura starts on the floor, so it's very much the duet happens on that low level. It's very floor based, and there's a small size of movement generally. Okay, so like small head circles, small kind of gesture details like the fingertips that grasp her wheelchair. So very slight action. So in terms of size of movement, it's quite small. This links to the stimulus because if you're kind of performing small movements, and you're on a low level, could suggest that you're quite encaged or trapped. So that just reinforces that idea of being trapped in a snow globe. In terms of dynamics, it is slow, delicate, smooth, soft and tender. So nothing sharp, fast, quick happening in this section. In terms of relationships, of course, we know that they make tentative contact, so the dancers are in contact. However, the majority of it is actually manipulating each other, so like moving a body part or moving the wheelchair. So it's essentially, and majority of it is just kind of manipulation through contact, moving each other. Okay, choreographic devices that is seen then. So unison is seen. In artificial things and working with inclusive dance, it's called a unison of textures. So meaning that the unison is as close as possible. Obviously, the dancers are just trying to be in unison as much as they can. So it's obviously not going to be exact unison, but the intention is definitely unison. So both dancers circle the head at the same time in the same way. Dave is slightly in front of Laura at the time, and this happens actually a couple of times as well, so a bit of repetition works in there as well. So what this contributes to is that it shows that intention of being viewed by afar, that they're kind of both using their head to look out, which is quite strange and kind of gives this eerie atmosphere. But also we can link it to finding resolution and getting over life's limitations. So the fact that they're both looking outwards, kind of searching for a resolution. The second one is repetition, and they do a head tilting motif where the head just inclines to the side. An example of this, a really nice example, is when both dancers lean in towards each other and their heads kind of rest on each other. And of course that head tilting happens a couple of times, hence why it's repetition. So it kind of gives a somber mood that when you're tilting your head and resting on each other, like you're down, you're a bit dreary, you're sad, maybe lonely. And it could link to the intention of being stuck in that snow globe. They're kind of stuck somewhere. So that is some of my contributions. Please feel free to grab your own choreographic device examples and then contributions as well. Okay, so just reminding yourself of the structuring device. So it's episodic in structure, but follows a semi-narrative in terms of like following the journey or the storyline of the dancers coming to terms with life's limitations. And just a reminder of our section, so this video is solely about Dave and Laura's duet, which is section 1, which is the one we study. Then we also study section 4 of gliding and section 7 of Dave's solo. Okay then, moving on to production features. Okay, so let's first start with oral setting. So it's natural sounds. So the type of oral setting, remember, is a natural sounds, and it's also mixed with orchestral. So in terms of natural sounds, there's the role of distant thunder. So it's like a thunderstorm is coming in from somewhere. We hear the wind sounds, and we also hear crunching sounds. So the snow crunching, like someone's walking towards, like the footsteps that Lucy Bennett originally described. And there's also the ticking of the clock in the background as well. And you have to listen really carefully to hear all of those things. But now they are described to you, I would strongly encourage when you go and watch it back, try and really hear those moments. In terms of orchestral, we have echoing of string instruments, and we also have a piano melody. In terms of how these contribute, so they link to the stimulus of the snowy landscape because you hear the crunching sound of almost like squashing of snow. The fact that you hear the ticking clock could link to the choreographic intention of passing of time, linking to this idea that people are finding resolution through limitations. And because the oral setting doesn't have many like strong layers on top of each other, it's not kind of thick and fast that this music is coming, it's quite sparse. So it gives that feeling that the space around them is quite empty. And creates and reinforces this isolated and empty atmosphere. Okay, in terms of the set, so we've mentioned it a bit, so we can see that snow, that fake snow scattered around. So Laura starts isolated on a collapsed wheelchair with snow scattered around. Paper snow is scattered on the ground in a diagonal from the vitrine to Laura, who is downstage right. So the vitrine, which you'll learn about in the next learning video, is further upstage. So it's scattered along in a pathway. But most of the snow is scattered around Laura. In terms of how this contributes, so it links to the stimulus, obviously, of an isolated figure on a collapsed wheelchair. Lucy Bennett's very first vision. So the snow involved with that is directly linked, and there is snow on the floor in the actual piece. The fact that the audience is looking into a snow globe, so the fact that there's snow on the floor just gives us that instant link of a snow globe. The snow is also supported by the lighting because the spotlights are white, which we'll get onto in a minute, but that just reinforces that snow to make it kind of stand out. And the snow, again, like we've just learned about the oral setting of the crunching of the snow, so that is also highlighted through the oral setting, and then of course seeing the snow as part of the set. Okay, in terms of how the dancers are used, so Laura at the beginning is just on her own against that perched on the floor, isn't she? So she's on her own, and Dave enters kind of from outside where the light is illuminating her. So he comes kind of out of nowhere and then joins to start the duet. So Laura being alone really suggests that she's kind of lonely herself and is quite isolated over there. Also, the fact that the wheelchair is on its side makes you concerned, obviously, like what has happened. So it does suggest that she's slightly vulnerable. Sorry about that. There's something out the window. Slightly vulnerable and lonely. Another contribution. So Dave entering could link to the idea of being viewed from afar. So the fact that he's coming in from out of nowhere maybe suggests that he's been looking at her for a while and then entering. And once Dave joins, obviously the amount of movement increases. So once there are more dancers, more movement comes from that. Okay, in terms of lighting, so there are two pools of white light. One is in centre stage and one is downstage right. So two white overhead spotlights at mid intensity, so they're not super powerful that you can like clearly see the circle outline, but they are at mid intensity so that they light up the dancers fully. And the whole duet happens within these two spotlights, almost as if they're kind of confined. So obviously, putting it very simply, that the spotlights highlight the dancers, that can be a contribution. The spotlights also restrict the dancers because the duet only happens in those spotlights. It's linking to that stimulus again of almost being stuck or trapped in a snow globe. The pools of white light create a tired and weary atmosphere. It's not kind of waking you up, it's not being energetic. It's almost like it could be at night time where this scene is happening. The white light link to the snow globe, of course, again, the colour of white linking to the snow, and it's suggesting a cold mood, like it's almost winter, and the lighting is obviously reinforcing that. Okay, in terms of costume, so let's first describe Dave's costume. Just to note that the pictures on the side are obviously from when the dancers were lit up better. These are not pictures from section 1. But I just wanted us to see that in like full light to be able to describe it. So Dave's costume is a loose-fitting, open-necked, short-sleeve shirt with loose-fitting grey trousers and a black belt. The shirt has green as its main colour with some blue on the right of his top. Laura's costume is a boat neck sleeveless vest top edged with navy blue. The top half is a mix of blues and the bottom half is mainly off-white. Pale grey loose-fitting trousers with a narrow blue belt. And Laura is the only dancer to wear shoes, and she wears black heels. So how does this contribute to the rest of the work? So the washed blue and green colour looks as if it's like paint running off the garments, which is reference to being stuck in one of the paintings, which is a stimulus. So the selection of paintings, Unknown Secrets by Goran Jurovic, is one of the stimuli. So directly taken from the costume, the painting on the colours is coming through in the costume, and the streaks on the costume match the back cloth of the set. The blue and light coloured costume links to the stimulus of a snow globe by being wintry colours. Each dancer has a very unique and different costume, so it highlights them individually. And Laura has a sleeveless top to show off her arm movements. Okay, so that was everything in Artificial Things, section 1, Dave and Laura's duet. So there was a lot of information there. I need you guys to go and watch it now because it is the best way of revising to really see the work. This will allow you to add as well any additional informations. Because essentially in the exam you're going to have to recall this, so it needs to be something that you're going to remember. So you might want to select slightly different examples than I have, but yeah, go and have a watch of the work and continue to add and revise.